Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and we get asked all the time, how the heck can I bring someone in to just close more sales for me in my business? Because a lot of you sell great services, a lot of you have great products, but you don't know how to close the sale. Well, that's why I'm so excited for all of us to learn from today's guest, because this is someone who not only understands sales at a really great level, but someone who understands how to teach and train sales at a level that sets so many people and so many businesses up for success. Let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Neal Rummler. Neal is a seasoned sales professional with over 10 years of experience in direct-to-consumer sales, which, as someone who's been in the world of entrepreneurship for a long time, I will say that direct-to-consumer sales might be one of the hardest arenas to sell in. Recently, Neal founded his own company, Maverick Marketing, which specializes in upselling within the pest control industry. He's doing really cool things with home services companies. He started in May of 2024, but they've already generated millions, with a plural S, millions of dollars in revenue. They provide elite sales talent to home services companies. I'm so excited to learn from Neal today, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Neal Rummler. All right, Neal, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian.
Heck yes. I'm excited to hear about not only the things that you do, but how you got there. So take us beyond the bio. Who's Neal? How did you start doing all this cool work?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California and needed a summer job. And I worked at Disneyland because it was convenient. It was close by. I actually was a Jungle Cruise skipper. If you've ever been on that ride, told the corny jokes, and then at the end of the summer, I looked at my total earnings. It was like $4,000. And I was like, that was back in 2013, so still not a lot of money back then. I said, I need to figure something else out. I need to make more money. And so that's when I got into summer sales. So for those that don't know, summer sales is a program that college students typically do. They'll go out and sell pest control, alarms, solar. Usually those are the top three. They'll do it in the summer and they'll make enough money to pay for their tuition so that they don't have to work during the school year while they're going through college. So that was the goal. It was to work during the summers, and then I wanted to become an attorney. And then I figured out that, hey, I actually don't like what attorneys do on a day-to-day basis. So long story short, I graduated law school in 2018 and then just got back into sales because it was what I was good at and what I was passionate about.
Yeah, I love that overview. Neal, not only that you recognize those things, not only that you fine-tune and sharpen your skills within the sales world, but take us to that entrepreneurial transition. Obviously, what you're doing right now with Maverick Marketing is you're impacting a lot of companies, not just growing your own, but you're servicing so many other home service companies. What did that transition look like, and the decision point that you actually said, I'm going to take action?
Yeah, so I was running kind of an upsell program with several pest control companies, several large companies, where I was in charge of the upsell to current customers. So it's like in the pest control space, it was like they already had general pest control, meaning just the regular service, but I would send out people to upsell them on termite control, and had a lot of success, saw a lot of success there with those companies. But I identified some key inefficiencies, and I was like, hey, if I just tweak this here or that there, the production would skyrocket. And ultimately made a decision after realizing that I could do it better. I just kind of splintered off and did my own thing. And it was slow at first couple of months. It took me a while to get my first contract, but now I'm contracted with 10 different pest control companies, and continuing to grow.
Yeah, it's very cool to hear about your growth. Neal, I want to ask you about the business model and the strategy that really powers this, because you talk about upsells, and obviously we've all heard about upsells and we've heard about different pricing models. Amazon, for example, when they entered the marketplace, they said, we're going to have some loss leaders. We're going to take a loss on the front end of sales, knowing that we're going to build an audience of loyal customers, and that became their model. How important is the upsell? How important is the initial sell? Talk to us about where your mind goes with that whole funnel of selling within the home services world.
So the cost of acquisition is one of the biggest hurdles for growth, especially among smaller companies. And it's like, what do I do? Do do I cold call? Do I hire a marketing team to have door-to-door guys? Because in my space, that's primarily how people grow, is door-to-door. But it's very expensive. And so obviously doing it in-house is cheaper, but some people want that steroid shot in the arm, in which case they outsource that. So I would say you definitely initially getting the customer, that's the hardest, but it's easier than you might think to sell and upsell to current customers, because there's already that rapport there. They already trust you. And yeah, it's just a value proposition that you're presenting to the customer. And I would say my secret sauce is I teach guys to sell in a non-confrontational way via questions, whereas most salespeople, they just push a product and they just talk about their features and benefits. And then at the end of the conversation, they're like, so what do you think? You want to buy it? And most people say, let me think about it. Let me get back to you. Whereas like I actually, if you've heard of Jeremy Miner, I use a lot of his tactics. In my opinion, he's the best sales trainer out there. Definitely rewired my brain on how to sell to consumers in the modern age when everyone's got their guard up. It's basically if I were to summarize it in a nutshell, my sales strategy, it's getting the prospect to sell themselves via questions.
Yeah, I love that. Neal, that's a big teaser. You're going to have to take us there, because it's easy for us to talk about the things that we shouldn't be doing. And we've all been there. Even when you gave that ugly example, I'm like, yep, every single entrepreneur, we've all done that in our own businesses. What do those questions look like to lead the customer to essentially convince themselves, it sounds like?
Yeah, it all depends on the setting. So it depends on if you're selling B2B or B2C. There's always going to be some discovery work, a little bit of discovery work. If it's versus if it's a non-customer versus a current customer, you do some discovery, figure out what their pain point is. That's the kind of the main thing you're trying to uncover. Once you figure out what the pain point is, then you've got to kind of like, this is kind of a gruesome analogy, but twist the knife a little bit, where it's like, hey, let's yeah, I've inflicted some pain, but let's show you how painful it really is. But I'm not going to show you, you're going to show yourself. And so an example of a question you might ask is consequence questions are very powerful, where you would ask something like, teeing it up, it would sound like, so how long has this problem been going on for you? Okay, and what kind of stress has that caused in your work life? Okay, and what about your personal life? Okay, and then what happens if we just, if you just continue the way that things are going? What if you just stay the course? What if you don't change anything? What's going to happen? Okay, and then you get them to start thinking, and then they start verbalizing of like, oh yeah, this is my problem. It's actually causing me a ton of stress. And if I could fix that, that would be amazing. Whereas most salespeople are just like, oh yeah, well, that problem, I could definitely help you out. This is why this product will help you out this way, this way, this way. And most entrepreneurs are so excited and so passionate about their product. It's like a fire hydrant of information of like, hey, here you go. And then it's like overwhelming, and they kind of get paralyzed, and they're just like, they freak out. Whereas like, if you do it the right way, prospects will be asking you, wait, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, why didn't you come? I wish you had come to me sooner. That's the responses that you'll be getting if you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, I love that. Neal, you feel bad using that twisting of the knife analogy, but I'll tell you, when I first learned copywriting, the first formula that I learned was PAS, problem, agitate, solve. And so the fact that you're bringing them through that, it's an important step of it. They have to actually feel and remember how bad that pain is. So I love how you incorporate that. A lot of listeners will hear you. They know that we're completely unscripted here on this show, and they'll think, Neal, you just so effortlessly rattled off those questions as examples. How scripted is it? Because I would imagine that you can rattle off a lot of questions along the way. Are these things that you just have gained through reps? Is there kind of a loose script that people follow? What are your insights there?
So in the sales world, I feel like there's this push and pull on like, oh, do you need to use a script? Do you not need to use a script? And I am a big proponent of scripts, at least foundationally. I think everybody needs a baseline and a foundation of what to say. And the analogy that I use there is like, think of Hollywood actors. The best of the best are reading lines. They're memorizing lines, but the reason they're paid so well is because it doesn't seem like they're reading lines. All you need to go do is go to a community theater, and you'll see the contrast in acting quality. And so really good salespeople are using scripts. They just don't act or sound like they're using a script. And that's where the practice and the talent can come together. And that's what I've seen in like most of my sales calls and coaching calls with guys. believe it or not, is just like, dude, why are you saying that? That is totally random. Like, that is not in the script. Go back to the script. And then they go back to the script and they close deals. And I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from guys who say, dude, Neal, you'll never guess what happened. I did exactly what you said. I did, said the words verbatim in the script, and they bought. And I'm just like smacking. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. Like, are you like? Do I have to say it like with like 25 different times? Do I have to be jumping on one foot while I'm saying this for this to resonate with you? So yeah, it's like definitely proponent of scripts and summary. And but for myself, I put in the 10,000 hours, so that's how I'm able to just rattle stuff off unscripted, is because I've done enough reps that I can think, basically shoot from the hip and think on the fly.
Yeah, I'm so glad you called that out. I always remind listeners, it's reps. And then until we get there, having that script to lean on. Neal, we're humans. We like to complicate things. That's why your guys are complicating it, because it seems too easy if they just follow the formula. So kudos to you for providing that to them and guiding them there and really hammering home, no, this stuff works. I really love that. I want to ask you about timeline, because that's something that I've been an entrepreneur for 16 plus years now. And I always struggle with that question of, when do I upsell, Neal? Is it immediately upon project delivery? Is it a week afterwards? Is there a soft way to do it, a more effective way to do it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on timeline.
I don't think there's one perfect way to do it. I started off in door-to-door sales, and so an opportunity to upsell in that scenario would be like, you sell them general pest control. And then at the very end, once you've already finished paperwork, occasionally, I would say, oh, and by the way, your neighbors were saying that they get really bad mosquitoes here because you backed up to a lake. Is that any interest to you at all whatsoever? And then they would be like, oh, actually, yeah, I've been looking for a mosquito. So in scenarios like that, yeah, you can upsell at the point of sale, right after you've closed them. And some people would argue that that's the easiest time to sell them, once they've already agreed to something. But for my business model now, currently, because I'm selling a higher ticket item in the $2,000-$3,000 range, I found it helps to season the customer a little bit. The earliest I recommend going to upsell them a higher ticket item is about 2 months. That case, in that scenario, they've received two services. That's the bare bones minimum. Now, I will say, like, I've also had the experience of upselling to customers who've been loyal customers for multiple years, 3+ years. Those were some of the easiest sales, where they weren't even questioning my findings, because the trust and rapport was already established and well established at that point. So I think it depends. You can be successful doing it at a variety of points, but don't overwhelm the customer. Like, they'll be very skeptical if you sell them a $500 item and then you turn around next week and you're trying to sell them $10,000 product. That's where you're going to start running into issues. But if it's similar in price, you could do it at the point of sale. If it's a little bit higher, I would say wait a little bit and season them.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear about your thought process there and the considerations that you enter into the mix, because we all have to extrapolate that for our own businesses, our own industries. Neal, a lot of companies probably haven't experienced the joy, the effectiveness, the ROI of bringing in external sales talent into functioning within their own business. Talk to listeners about that model, because I love the fact that you've recognized you've done this for other companies. Why not supply talent to other companies to do it for them? It's a different type of model than what a lot of entrepreneurs entertain, but it's super effective, because that's probably the thing most entrepreneurs complain about is sales. Why not have people who love sales do the selling for them? Give us an overview of that model and how it works.
Yeah, so I experimented with price points in the beginning to see kind of what was a win-win, and I came up with a pretty awesome proposition. And it's not hard to close the owners for the most part. The thing that's hard about it is if they're too old and set in their ways, they just see my price as they're like, oh, that's way too high. I would never consider doing that. It's just because they're used to doing it one way. So it's kind of falls in that category of can't teach an old dog new tricks. But if they're a little bit younger, they're all about it. They're super excited, maybe a little bit skeptical in the beginning, but once they see the revenue coming in, it's cash flow positive for them, so it's profitable. The revenue that I bring in is profitable day one, and so that excites them. And you know, it's a steroid shot in the arm. Like I said, it's like you bring in these sales mercenaries, guys that have been seasoned via door-to-door sales, 5-6 years experience. they're the best of the best. Like, it doesn't get harder than being able to brave those conditions for multiple years in the hot sun. You know, a lot of these guys are on foot, getting rejected hundreds of times a day. So when you give them a warm lead, that's a layup for a guy with that kind of a background. And that's why the success is so immediate, is because they're used to cold calling. That's all they do. At least with me, that's like all they do. And so they get into a setting with a warm lead, and they're like, it's like a godsend. They're so grateful. They treat it with respect. They're not going to be complaining about leads like, oh, this is a terrible lead. It's like, no, they're grateful that it's a lead, period. And so, yeah, I mean, that's why it's a win, is because it also, it brings in the revenue, but number two, it kind of like levels up the organization in terms of what is possible. Like, in their minds, the numbers that I say on a sales call, even though I'm showing them screenshots to back up what I'm saying, a lot of times they don't believe it until that revenue hits their bank account. And it's funny because they're like, are you sure you're going to be able to get those prices? Like, it's a really competitive market. And then I'll send the guys in and they'll deliver. And it's kind of like the 4-minute mile. If you know who Roger Bannister is, everyone said it's humanly impossible. Like, you will die. The human body is not capable of running a sub 4-minute mile. And then he was the first to do it. And then lo and behold, 15 other people, I can't remember the exact number, broke the 4-minute mile barrier later that year. And that's kind of what happens when I inject my salespeople into an organization. They're like, oh, wow. Well, if they're doing that, I should be able to do at least half of that production. And so it's like, even if you don't use us forever, there's going to be that intangible benefit long term.
Yeah, I love that analogy of Roger Bannister. That is so influential because it opens the door to possibilities, which, Neal, we're going to get into your entrepreneurial mind in just a little bit as well, because I know there's a little bit of rebellion there. We're going to throw some shade at traditional education and the costs involved. But before we get there, it's really cool hearing about this, especially you and I talked off air before we hit record about you found your niche. You understand the home services industry. You know that you can help them there. What's that onboarding look like? Is it essentially, we have that old cliche in the world of sales is someone can sell ice to an Eskimo. Doesn't matter what they're selling. The fundamentals, the principles are the same. Is there extensive onboarding for these sales guys to get to know the companies that they're selling for? What does that look like?
So right now we're just in the pest control space. So it's super streamlined. Like, literally I just need a customer list, and then I have people that call and set up the leads, and then the closers go out. So the company literally only has to worry about the service side, the installation of what we're selling. If it was a new industry though, for example, HVAC or roofing, something like that, where I'm not super well versed in that product, yeah, it would be, some product education time that would need to be spent on educating me and the closers on the product. But you're correct in the sense that sales is sales at the end of the day. Once you have that product knowledge, you can apply these principles to any product and sell it. That's why you see guys that are in door to door. A lot of them transition into tech sales and really are successful there, just because they have that foundation where a lot of sales is just straight mental. It's like, it's you versus you. And so if you've already established and won that mental battle so many times, when you go into a different industry and it's a different product, like, it's so easy to onboard because you have that foundation and you're just basically calloused. Like, imagine like kicking your leg against a wooden post, and then you upgrade to like a metal frame to callus your shin bone, so you don't break your leg when you kick. That's what door to door does to you in a figurative sense.
Yeah, for sure. Neal, hearing the scope of the work that you do, it's fun for me to envision what your responsibilities and your role is since you've started your company, because I imagine part of it is finding that sales talent, onboarding and training that sales talent, but also, of course, managing the client side of the world. And then, of course, behind all of this is managing your own business as you've continued to grow. What does that role look like? How are you separating and addressing all the different sides of your business?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was doing a lot of it, but then one thing that I saw other people fail at as entrepreneurs was the inability to delegate. And it's, variety of reasons. It happens for a variety of reasons. A lot of times it's like a control freak who doesn't trust people, or they just they are perfectionists and they want everything done a certain way. And so because of those shortcomings, personally, they fail to delegate, but then they end up working 20 hours a day and they're miserable because they're exhausted, right? And so I saw that and I said, I'm not going to do that. And so I've gotten really good at delegating and empowering my employees to basically fix their own problems and giving them the autonomy to do that. And if they come to me with the problem, I've trained them. I was like, look, what have I taught you? Don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And that's trained them to be like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna need you to handhold me through this entire process. Like, so I think that's huge, is the ability to delegate. That's what I do a lot of. But right now, because I've been good at delegating, I can focus more time on courting new clients and making sure that the relationships that I have currently with clients are going smoothly. So some of that is analytics, looking at close rates, contract values, making sure those are good. So there's a little bit of quality control there. And so it's kind of like general oversight now, and courting clients is where I primarily spend a lot of my time. Obviously, there's sales training. And so I do those weekly meetings with guys, sometimes individual calls if they're in a slump for whatever reason. But yeah, for the most part, the day-to-day operations stuff, I've delegated those tasks, and it's awesome because it allows me to live a semi-retired lifestyle almost, where it's like, even though I am the CEO of the company, I have a lot of free time to spend with my family and do things that I enjoy as well.
Yeah, I love that overview, Neal, and I love the fact that you're so committed to growing your business in that way. So huge kudos to the work that you've been putting in, because it's really cool to see the rewards. We don't just do the work for work's sake, we do it for the rewards, and I love the fact that you share that with our listeners here. I want to go a little bit deeper into that sales training, because you called out the slump, and I love that. Earlier in our conversation, you said so much of sales is mindset, and it's not rocket science. And I would imagine when a sales rep is going through that slump, they're thinking, am I saying the wrong things? Like, what is it? Where do you go with them? How do you get people out of that sales slump? Is it tactical? Is it conversational? Is it mindset? I'd love to hear how Neal guides them through that.
So it depends on the rep 100%. So how I'm going to approach a slump with a top producer is completely different than how I'm going to present, basically handle a slump with somebody that's maybe middle of the road. I don't really bother with the bottom 25%, just because it's like, and this goes for all sales managers. It's like the bottom 25%, and same thing with like the top 25%. They're going to be unchanging. They're going to take care of themselves for the most part. Where you really want to focus your time and effort is on the middle guys. The middle guys are where you can affect change and affect the culture and improve your organization overall as a whole. Because when the average raises, then everything gets better. And so with a top producer, I try to make it easier. What I mean by that is, like, I try to get them to not think about sales. They're usually overthinking it. They can do it. They're just being overly analytical or whatever. So I try to make it easier. I'm like, dude, just unplug from sales. Like, you can sell. Go play Xbox. Go do something just completely unrelated to sales for a day. Like, take a day off. And that's usually enough to reset them sometimes. If it's a little bit deeper than that, I have a mental coach that I have hired and outsourced. And it's kind of like a good cop, bad cop combination, where it's like, I struggle with empathy. I'll be honest. Like, that's one of my weak points, is like, I didn't receive a whole lot of empathy growing up. And so I'm kind of just like that tough love kind of a guy, where I'm just like, dude, just suck it up. Like, come on, like, you can do it. Like, and then I have another guy who is a life coach that is really, really good at what he does. And if guys are struggling, I'll kind of delegate that to that, because I'll delegate that phone call or that conversation to him, because I know that's not my strong suit. And so I have outsourced myself on stuff that I recognize I'm not good at. If it's a middle of the road guy, I try to do a little more dissecting, and I figure out, okay, what are you actually saying here in the pitch? And like I said before, it's usually they're deviating from the secret sauce. And a lot of the times they have ADD, and they're just like, they get so bored of doing the same thing over and over again. They're like, oh, maybe if I mix it up, it'll actually, it'll work better. And it's the opposite. When you mix things up from what's been proven, they do worse. And so it can kind of spiral. But when I get them back to basically square one and say, hey, look, if you just stick to this script, I promise you, if you deliver it with the right tonality, you're going to see success. And, so that's what I do mainly with that, and try to dissect a little bit what's going on in their personal life, see if there's anything going on there that I can help with. It's usually not, it's multifaceted. It's not just one thing. There's usually a couple things that are contributing to that slump. And then, just making sure that you show them that you care and you genuinely are concerned about their success and not treating them as a number. I think that's also huge that a lot of sales leaders neglect, is they're so focused on the number when you really need to focus on the individual and realize that it's a person with emotions. We're emotional beings by nature. And even if some of us as entrepreneurs, if we're a lot more logical, taking a logical approach, like a direct logical approach, is usually not the way to address a slump.
Yeah, I love that answer, Neal. That right there, there's so many nuggets of knowledge within that answer. Listeners, go back and listen to it again. Neal, I would argue that you're showcasing a little bit of empathy in that response, so super appreciate that. And that level of self-awareness, I think that in and of itself is also a positive trait of why you're successful at the things that you do. So love hearing those insights. I want to put you on the spot because this is something that you and I are both definitely passionate about. I graduated from a 4-year college. You obviously went forth and you went to law school. And in hindsight, you and I both think about ROI, obviously, as entrepreneurs ourselves. But I think that a lot of people realize, and we're at an important time in period in the United States and probably worldwide, where we're questioning, what is that path? Is the traditional path still one that is valued? I think it's really cool that you work in sales because sales doesn't care about your college degree. Sales doesn't care about a lot of that. What's your take on the way that traditional institutions are? And especially since you're a fellow entrepreneur with that rebellion inside of you, what's your advice for others when it comes to the educational paths?
So I would say, how do I say this respectfully? I get a lot of calls from private equity research firms, and what they want to know is about pest control, about service-based industries, because what they're looking for is like, hey, where do we put our money? Where do we invest our money over the next 10, 20, 30 years? And I will tell you, the cat is out of the bag. They are fully aware of the massive potential in home services and trades. That is where private equity is shifting their money. And the reason, in my opinion, is because they're thinking, what can a robot not do for the next 20, 30 years? What is AI not going to be able to take over instantaneously? And it's skilled trades, guys. If I was 18 years old, I would 1,000% go to a trade school. I would learn a marketable skill that could, you could lump sales in that. You could become a professional salesperson and learn everything there is to know about sales. And I would argue that falls into the trades as well. That's what I would do, because the college degree for the most part is the new high school diploma. And the ROI, if you're spending $100,000, even half that, $50,000 for a 4-year degree, and it's not leading to a career such as like engineering, nursing, like there isn't a set job that's ready for you after you graduate, you are honestly wasting your time. If you're pursuing liberal arts degrees, that's what I did. I studied American Studies. I wrote a lot of papers. I got really good at communication, I guess, but I could have done all of that outside a formal degree. I could have taught myself that. Information is free on the internet. Colleges are no longer the gatekeepers to information. Information is at our fingertips. So in summary, learn a trade, go work for somebody for a couple of years, learn the ins and outs of that business. And then if you have the gumption and courage to start your own business, you will be extremely wealthy. That's my advice.
Yes, I love that, Neal. I'm going to put you on the spot in a second for another piece of advice with your entrepreneurial hat on outside of the context of education. But I love the way that you articulate that, because it's also recognizing trends. That's what I hear so much in that answer that you shared with listeners. And in a world where every episode, I feel like we're talking about AI in so many different ways. Listeners are always emailing, asking about AI. Listeners, you see the way that Neal's mind works of asking what can't be replaced. It's funny, a year ago, I probably probably would have said podcasting can't be replaced, but we've already done an episode, Neal, where AI completely takes over podcasting for us because it's getting so good at all of these things. So I really appreciate hearing that executive mind of yours. And like I said, I'm going to put you on the spot for one more piece of advice, this time with your entrepreneurial hat on, knowing that we're being listened to by both wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their growth journeys. They've already taken the plunge and they've said, I want to grow my business. I have these skills. I want to grow. You've obviously experienced that exponential growth from the time that you started your company. With that entrepreneurial hat on, what's the one piece of advice you want to leave them with today?
Become a master of monotony. So in layman's terms, get really, really good at doing one thing over and over again. And that's the ticket. That is the key to success. Somebody told me that it was Dave Royce. He came to BYU. He was the founder of Aptive. So for those of you who know, in the pest control space, very, very successful, very large pest control company. And that's what somebody asked him that question, and that's what he said. And I'll never forget that because it's so true. It's like, what is McDonald's known for? Really doing one thing really, really good. All right. And it's like every successful business out there that you can trace it back to that foundation. Become a master of monotony, doing the same thing over and over again, but getting really good, perfecting that process.
Boom. I love that advice. Neal, it's not easy in over 1,100 episodes to give different types of advice. That right there is one I'm not sure we've ever heard it, and it's so important. You make me realize all the most successful entrepreneurs in my network, anytime I text them, I say, what's new? Like, what is it that you're working on? And they say, same thing I've been working on. Whereas the not as successful entrepreneurs, I'll text them and they'll say, I've got all these new ideas and I'm trying this and I'm trying that. So absolutely love it. It's a testament to the way that you show up in the world as well, Neal. So huge kudos to you. I love the fact, I'll call it out for listeners. Before we hit record, when I asked you about your niche, you said, no, this is what we do and this is what we're really good at. And I love the fact that you double down on that. So with all of that said, Neal, I respect and admire all the work that you're doing. I know that listeners will be keen to check out your website and all the great work that you're up to. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, easiest place if you're looking to engage and hire would be my Instagram. There's some links on there. It's just Maverick Marketing. It's got some bullhorn logos that you'll be able to see. So pretty easy to find me.
Yes, especially easy because listeners, you already know the drill. We're dropping that link down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Neal, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks for having me.